career journey so far?
Sorry, I'll just wait. I've seen it's being recorded. Okay. Please
Yeah, I
repeat.
should have clicked that earlier, but I just realized.
It's okay. Uh-huh.
All right, so I was just saying that please could you give me like a brief recap of your journey so far, like into data science and all of that good stuff as we move along into the conversation.
So yeah, my journey is quite interesting. So I'll first of all just start from far off with my background and all that and how I arrived to this space. So I finished uni, I think like close to what now? It's probably getting to maybe 15 or 16 years ago. One of the things I keep telling people is that during my time in uni, when we had the computer science and computer engineering courses, the only thing we studied about data was databases. That's the only thing we studied. Like, it never went beyond that. And even the likes of this NoSQL and all those, such things never existed. It was just purely databases. And I think then it was just MS SQL, Oracle, and I think Microsoft SQL. So as the world has evolved and the space of technology has evolved, this new field called data engineering and data science and all that came up, right? Which never ever existed back then. So this field for me has been pretty much evolving and learning. That's simply what I would say. Like taking my experiences from an engineering background where we started off in software engineering and now trying to grow into the new field of data engineering and just everything to do with how data has evolved. So my experience getting into this place was I got an opportunity with an organization here in Ghana to come and work with them as engineering manager and to help them set up a data team. And when I came, of course, they said this and these are the things we want to do, this and these are the things we want to achieve. And to be honest, I had no idea I was not well familiar with this technology that had evolved in data engineering, the Python, the pandas and all that. I was not even aware of those things. It had to be a learning experience for me, like beginning to learn that, there are tools out there now that you can use to process huge amounts of data and do certain things with data that are not necessarily MySQL,
Right.
Because the only way we knew how to process data was, especially from a tech perspective, was you write queries and you build your analysis from that. And then now you're being introduced now to a programming language that can add value and allow you to do this with large sets of data, which, of course, if you're using a normal traditional database, it would limit you because of the processing and the reading and all that. So I had to learn these things in my new role, study about the pandas and all that and see how it's supposed to be used. This, I think, was in 2017. And from there, I worked on setting up a team that would spearhead the data engineering and the data department where I am right now. And so there are a lot of things I have to say that I did in terms of, first of all, being able to set up, there are quite a number of projects I did. One was being able to set up automated process of reporting, because at that point in time, the reporting team that was there only knew how to do Excel sheets. Even running queries, they did not have that capability. So they only knew how to just put things. The only thing they could do is someone pulls the information from them from a database, loads it on an Excel sheet, and then they will use that to at least come up with a report. And the data was growing on a daily basis to a point that I think probably you may be aware of this. Excel can only take in so much information.
Right.
Trying to work with data. So we had to start rethinking around how are we going to process our growing data on a daily basis and be able to provide input and analysis from it to the business. And so having to start learning these technologies like Python and Pandas now started coming in, like how do we take in our incoming data and process it and make sure we can put out some reports. So again, so that's one of the projects that I worked on, like with the team. which was doing automated reports through Pandas and being able to push it out to the business teams. And that way, at least the team was taken, the responsibility to spend 3, 4, 5, 6 hours preparing a report was taken away. And it also freed up the team then to start learning new things. So like they were able to now begin learning things like SQL, like how do I just start doing basic query writing so that I can be able to do this and this? Because even when you're working with tools like Python and all Pandas, you still need some basic SQL skill writing for you to at least get to the core of what you're doing. The other project that I recall that I had to work on also was setting up a data warehouse. Yeah, because what happened was that our business we work with partners. That's how our business works. And from these partners, we collect data. We process our customer data, and a lot of business data is processed on this platform. But what was happening was that the ownership of the data was not on our hands. It was on the client's platform. And so if anything should happen to the client platform, the risk for us as a business was we would have lost all our information.
Right.
So what I did was at that time, I went and I had a conversation with the CEO and said, we need to start thinking into how we can create a centralized point where all our business data, in as much as we're interacting with other third parties and platforms, all our business data is always streamlined into a single source. And that of course had to be a warehouse. So that should we get to a point whereby we want to terminate our relationship with that partner, or should something happen to the partner's platform, at least we know we have our data. And so the process to start looking into building a data warehouse started happening. It was a long project. I had to learn on it. I say this, but as I was saying this, I was learning on how the whole data warehouse work, because I had not also really created a data warehouse before in my life. So I got into reading, and I had someone who gave me a book, and I was reading like, okay, these are the things you need to do, this is the research you need to do. And of course, we went down, we started looking. He had actually started a project like that with a similar person. It was interesting to find that out, but those people were not doing the right thing. So I told him, let's cancel that contract. Let's go back to the drawing board and make sure we're doing the right thing. So yeah, we went back to the drawing board, and then I did a bit of research into what it would take to have the data warehouse, and then we were able to interview a few consultants who we thought would be best in getting us set up. And we got one who was actually very effective, not as expensive as what they were dealing with before. And then from there, we now began the project of building the data warehouse. The first thing I remember we did is that we did like more of a recce, where we did an interview with all our business teams. So we called in members from the customer experience department, the sales department, the inventory and stock management, the finance department, just to be able to understand, first of all, the kind of data they interact with, what kind of data do they want us to make available for them, and also be able to understand the challenges they're dealing with data. So for example, one of the challenges we had was that people were storing information on Google Sheets. And these Google Sheets are not even sometimes something that are business inclined or business aligned, that this is what the business recognizes as a source of information. The Google Sheets sometimes just belonged to someone. So if this person decide to delete that information or leave the organization, that information just goes. And that's probably key business information. Some people were recording things on their books. Others were storing information on emails, like everything was all over the place, in addition to the fact that our core processing data was also being stored in other third-party platforms. So just collecting all this feedback and then being able to assess, like, now, how do we want to ensure that we have more of like a single source of truth for the entire business, where all business operational data will only be pulled from this platform. If someone comes in and says, I have a report from a Google Sheet or from a certain book they've been taking notes, that will no longer be acceptable, because now the business is beginning to structure itself in a way that all its information will come from a single source of truth.
Yeah.
Right. So we did that survey, and it took us like about a month just engaging and trying to understand what's going on in the business. And then from there now, we were able to draw out a plan with the consultant, and even come up with a budget of the kind of tools we needed to work with. So of course, we went for some cloud tools that you'd work with. For our case, it was AWS. And we interacted, we ended up selecting Redshift, which is one of their data warehouse services.
Right.
And of course, other services on the platform, which of course are going to be used in doing the whole data pipeline processing, because it's a whole pipeline which involves different tools. So S3 buckets and a bunch of infrastructure tools. So again, sitting down with the client and just first of all drawing out this architect layout of how are we going to do this? How are we now going to start engaging our third-party clients and tell them we want to start streaming in data from you? So that was also another challenge that we needed to deal with, where we now told the partners, every day we want you to dump a backup of all our transactional data into this platform. And it was a bit of back and forth. Some of them, of course, were saying, oh, we cannot give you access to this and all that. And of course, we had to keep sitting down and engaging and thinking, how are we going to make sure that we get our data? Because at the end of the day, it's our data. And you have to find a way to make sure we get that data. So we engaged our third parties, and we found a way in which they would, at the end of every day, business day, a daily dump of the transactional data on the system would get to us. And this information will now be what gets processed and loaded into our warehouse. And that way, at any point in time, we always had our up-to-date data available on our platform. So even if the partner decided today that they're canceling the contract or we're ending our business with them, all our information was there. The Google trackers that people were using to capture information, we found a way to make sure that this information was also going to be pushed into the warehouse, so that at no point in time is there key business information sitting with someone. So it was a very stressed, long learning curve, not just for me, even my team at that time, because I was an engineering manager, just helping them to start thinking around how we are going now to start working with a warehouse, and no longer the way we were just working, pulling data from some SQL databases and all that and everything. And also just bringing in a practice of a single source of truth, where all information is being pulled from one place.
Okay.
So that's one of the other projects. We've also been engaged in other projects internally. There are a few projects that were a bit data science related, although the data science projects were not intense, because I usually say sometimes when you're starting off on an organization and you're trying to set up a data department, data science sometimes doesn't come in immediately.
Right, yeah.
One of those things that can come as the business grows and begins to identify its shape and what it's looking for. So we needed to get the basics right. First of all, get the basics right by ensuring that we have people in-house capable of being able to run at least these roles within the data team. So at least get people with an analytical background, get people with an engineering background who can learn how to process data. That was the first thing. The next thing was making sure that we have control of our data, because we didn't even have control of our own data. So what data would we be looking into or trying to process? So there was a lot of foundational work that needed to be done. So even when it came to some of the data science projects, we had to host them externally, because in-house, the business was not yet at that place where it had the capability of running like the data science projects. But also you realize with data science projects, again, you have to first of all get your data clean. It was a challenge we were dealing with, you see. And so even some of the data science projects that we were trying to do, some of them really did not go as successful as we wanted. because there was some key critical data that was either missing or the data was just not in the right state for it to be used for some of those observations that you want to be able to draw out of those data science projects that people do, right? So as a business, I have to say that we've kept on evolving and even improving the kind of data we are collecting, because as we've engaged in some of those data science projects, some of the feedback we get is that you need to start collecting this type of data. So even we had to introduce tools, for example, within our work, our place of working. So for example, one of the areas we deal with is a call center. And in this call center, because the service we offer is financial assets, where we probably give people items on loan. It means that we need to be able to collect certain information from customers, so that when we are trying to assess and do things like predicting what's the likelihood of a customer moving into credit risk and all that, we are collecting the right information. So we had to even bring in tools that would facilitate us to actually start collecting the right kind of data, such that when we want to eventually run projects that need to do with predictive analytics, which pretty much touches more around the data science side, we would now have proper data to work with. Because the projects we had initially tried to work on, it was very evident that our data was not in the best state. We were not collecting enough data. Our data was corrupted. So that's why I was saying that a lot of people rush to the data science bit, but I keep saying that data science is even something that comes when your organization has evolved and it's become a bit more mature in understanding what their model of working is and what the kind of data that they're interacting with is. But unfortunately, most organizations work in the reverse. They want to do all this predicative analytics because, you know, the word sounds exciting. It sounds, you know, very, I don't know what's the word, geeky or just fancy.
Right.
But when you go down into the details, you realize, one, your business does not even have data. It does not have the right data. So everything you're trying to do with all these things, you're talking about data science and all that, cannot happen. So one of the things that I think I've learned through my journey as I've grown and learned this area is that, one, the foundations needs to be right. You need to get the foundation right. Get your data collect your data properly, have the right resources, because even one of the things I usually tell people is that because this was a field that a lot of people who probably studied computer science and engineering back in the days did not learn, you realize that even when you hire people, you have to train them. Because this is not something that most people who did an undergraduate course in computer science or whatever it is actually learned. There was no institution that was teaching pandas or whatever. These are things that people are now beginning to learn. So one of the things even that I had to do when we were setting up the team is that I needed to take the team through a learning process. So there was a whole learning curve before we even got to a place where we could literally figure out that this is how the shape of the data team is going to look like. This is what we want to do and all that. It was an entire learning process. So it's one of the things I've also come to learn, that this whole data space for a lot of organizations, I think organizations need to be patient.
Right.
And they need to realize that it's going to be a collaborative work of growth. You can't just all of a sudden have these mighty insights and all that. Even Google, Facebook, they started off as just platforms that were allowing people to connect and get information. And then it's over time, as things have gone, that they've realized that this information we've been gathering for, because most of them started somewhere around where Google started becoming more highly effective somewhere in 2006. Facebook came in somewhere in 2007. They've been doing this for a while, but they were not doing this analytics. They were just connecting people and allowing people to get information. And then over time, as things have gone, of course, things have evolved, and now they suddenly realize we have so much information on people, right? How can we actually transform this information to begin adding value to different ways? And so now you see things like YouTube, which existed years ago, have now become monetary platforms. Why? Simply because as the businesses collected data, they realized that this is data we can monetize on, because people are not just going to be entertained, they're actually learning from these platforms. They're getting informed on this platform. So we need to actually reward people through the information they're sharing. So like I said, the whole data thing is, so if you want to get to levels where Google and all that are, you also need to look at their journey and realize that they had to grow into it. So you can't be a small organization that you've just started as a startup and you're now expecting all these mighty things to appear.
Right. Yeah, very true.
Yeah,
very true. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say that, I mean, I feel like that's a very solid background about like yourself and just being in the data engineering space. But before we move on to like really, I think drilling down on you, like just talking more about like that your project. I think I would want to like get to know that part more in terms of like the technical bits. I would also want to ask about what your expectation is in terms of the kind of opportunities you're looking out for. So like salary, are you looking for like a full-time remote role or a contract role? Also, what's like your preferred work expectation?
So for me, I would definitely, I don't know how the contract ones would look like. I would not mind to do the contract ones if they're gonna come on an often basis.
Right.
But definitely a full-time option would also be something that I'm open to.
Okay.
I think also from my career experience and just having grown into this role, I feel like I would be more driven towards wanting to help, especially institutions, in terms of how they can really, really grow their data side.
Right.
Because I feel like there's, like I said, my experience has shown me that we want to see a mountain and forget that we need to walk to get there. And so you realize, as much as most institutions are trying to do all these things that you're saying, the analytics that is now coming up, that has become such a huge space, the engineering, the machine learning and all those things, there's still certain basics that other institutions are missing out on. That they need to go into. Sorry?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that I mean, the basis for it is data collection and getting the right kind of data.
Exactly.
In the first place.
Exactly. And even that data collection is not just data collection that people think.
Yeah.
It's so much up, because I've actually seen us within the team as I started learning these pandas and all that, and even just growing and being able to set up the setup we have right now. Was we got to a place where we realized, yes, the code can process and all that, but guess what? It's processing garbage.
Right.
So you can, yes, you're there coding, you've gotten it right, you know, your code is not throwing bugs and all that, but guess what? You're processing garbage, because at the end of the day, the code has worked, it's automated everything, but the output, it comes out and the business realizes, wow, there is no value input in this information you just gotten. Now we have to go back to the drawing board and start looking at the variables we are processing on our systems and be like, we need to probably add this variable. We need to probably tweak this variable like this and process it this way, so that when we are now processing the data, we can capture it in a better format.
Right.
You get my point? Yeah.
So in terms of salary, what if you're taking a full-time role, what's like the base for you?
Can I express it in net?
Oh yes, sure.
So in net, I would be expecting something like around $5,000. I would say that, because currently where I am, I'm not a Ghanaian. I mean, I'm based in Accra right now.
Right.
I am Kenyan. That's my native. But of course, I came here working for a foreign company and supporting them and all that. So, of course, my experience and all that has pretty much grown
over time.
Yeah, over time. And I really feel like, as much as I would, I'm gonna get my hands on, I really feel one of the places that I feel I'd really, really love to move into, especially in the data engineering and just the data field, is more towards a leadership role. That's where I really and really, really help institutions a lot. Because like I said, getting the other stuff done, like I said, the coding, all that stuff can get done.
Right.
Trust me. But even if you have a group of engineers that you've employed to do all the engineering and cool things for you, but the engineers, first of all, and let me tell you, one of the things I observed is that data engineering and software engineering are so different. They are so different. In as much as it's very easy for someone in a software engineering background to easily blend into data engineering,
right,
and data and all those other parts, because there's an aspect of engineering that's related to it. But it's not just that. The thing with data side is that you need to understand what the data is about. You need to understand what the business is trying to do. And until you get to a place whereby the teams you're working with have that understanding of what the business is about and what they're trying to do, you will do everything. You will have your Tableaus, your Power BI, you will have your machine learning models, but trust me, the whole point of you doing all this is such that your business can be able to end up being what? Valuable, and
right,
be able to create the impact and revenue it wants to create. But the thing is that all these tools are being inculcated into businesses, but businesses are still at the same place where they were.
right.
You see?
Okay.
So that's pretty much where I would love to see myself, like really working directly with the teams and also just helping the technical teams and the business teams be able to have that blend and really have a data department that really is driving value for your business. When you look back and they're like, oh, when we started, we were dealing with this information. We've been able to transform how we're collecting our information, and we've been able to see the impact and the change our business has had because we've transformed the way we collect our data, we've transformed the way we process our data, and now the output of what we're getting is adding value to us.
Okay. I think that's very sounds really good. But I also wanted to, before we move on to the project, I'm just curious to know, like in brief, how the journey was from you from university. I mean, where was the first place you worked? And I mean, moving from there to where you are now.
So my journey in university, when was it? That was like in 2006. Oh my God. Yeah, so I went to university in the university that I went to was called Strathmore University. It's one of our leading private universities actually in Kenya, because I think it could be the only university that has partnerships with a lot of the Ivy League universities. So Harvard, Stanford, and all that. Yes. So even you being there, there's a lot of exchange and information that you really, really get to learn from. So that's where I went to, and I basically studied a course which was computer science, and I would say with a minor in terms of stuff to do with business, which I felt was important because a lot of times the computer science courses then were just pretty much just making you think one way. And then this was the only university at that time which was offering a course whereby they had added an aspect of a minor in business with a person doing computer science or computer engineering, as opposed to the other universities which were purely just doing engineering all the way. And I think that really helped my journey because you will always stand out as a technical person when you at least have an eye for a businessy thing and not just always looking at it from let's get the code running, even if it's running crap. So that's how my journey started. And then as soon as I finished, I always tell people that when I was joining uni, the feel of the startup thing that's when the whole startup vibe was really, really beginning to grow. Because Google had just opened, that was in 2006. And then Facebook opened a year later in 2007. And then Twitter came just right after it. So there was all this buzz that was happening in the tech space. And then I remember Google launched the Android just at the end of 2006, the Gingerboard man. And they had this small phone. And so there was just all this excitement that was happening in the tech space, and there was all these things that were happening. And so I remember as soon as we cleared uni, when I finished uni, when we discussed with my friends, I told my friends, I'm going to work for a tech startup. And they looked at me and they were like, June, are you going to work for these companies which are not even sure whether they're going to exist or not, you know?
Right.
And, you know, at that time, the university I was in, they would bring all these big companies, you know, PricewaterhouseCoopers, these big consultancy firms, and, you know, everyone wants to work for a big consultancy firm, right? Or a big financial institution. And I remember telling my friends, I'm not going to work in a bank. I cannot let all my years of technology be wasted in a bank, because I had this impression that banks outsource like 90% of their technical work.
Right.
So all I would just have to do there is probably be sitting, signing off papers, or joining a cable somewhere, because someone has already done all the work. And it was just like, I don't feel like my brain is going to really be made good use of. So I stayed for a longer time before I got a job compared to the rest of my peers, because most of them went to like I said, some of them were going to the big consultancy firms and others went to work for banks then. Because again, you know, in terms of technology, I think the only institutions that were close to a sense of technology were financial institutions, which were banks.
Yeah.
And so I stayed for that time, I think I stayed for close to 11 months or like that. But in between, I was doing voluntary work with one of the first tech women groups that time. It's called Akira Chicks, and they've really grown right now. I think they're now in East Africa. But I went and started working with the tech groups that time. So I was teaching young girls how to do coding, helping them in terms of how to grow the experience and all that. So during that time of me waiting, I was volunteering and engaging a lot with tech groups, because at that time we used to have Google forums and all that, and just getting to understand what's really happening in this field of technology. So that's how my gap was within the 11, 12 months of waiting. And then I got an internship with a certain company, and I was able to work for them for 3 months. And then at first, when I got the internship, I remember going to my mom and saying, why am I doing an internship? I'm a graduate, I should be working. And my mom was like, June, beggars are not choosers.
Right.
Just go with it and learn. That's what you're in a season of learning. You're not in a season of being entitled because you got a degree. You know nothing. So I went there. The workload was a lot. They were paying me peanuts, I'll tell you for sure. But the experience was what I had to keep. I always kept reminding myself what my mom kept telling me: go for the experience.
Right.
You're not in a place where you get to choose what you want. As you grow your experience, people will now come and tell you, how much do you want us to give you? Because they can see what you already can offer.
Right.
And so I stayed there, and then after that, good enough, I got an opportunity with a fintech startup. And I remember going to my mom and saying, I've just found this company that's going to hire me. It's a startup, they're exploring things. And my mom asked me, how sure are you of their survival rates? And I said, I am convinced they will survive because they're doing something exciting. And so I joined this company. It was a fintech startup. Again, at that time, the fintech field was not as huge as it is right now, because that was somewhere in 2010, 2011. And this company was actually offering a solution whereby they allow people to be able to borrow airtime when they run out of airtime. Or if you've run out of cash, which was something, you know, right now there's so many companies offering cash. Money. That was in 2010, 2011. You tell me whether you know a company that was doing that at that time. Absolutely, even if you check, you'll find no company was doing that. Yeah. But these people were already in the vision of where the world is today at that time. So we started off, we were doing a product for Airtel Kenya at that time. And lo and behold, things just started happening. The next thing we were in Uganda. The next thing we were in Zambia. And the next thing, let me just say, we were in Africa. We were in Cote d'Ivoire, we were in Swaziland, we were in South Africa, we were in Cameroon, we were in Ghana, you name it, with this solution. Because suddenly it was a solution we were offering through the mobile money networks. The mobile money networks realized that, yeah, people do run out of airtime, and sometimes they don't have the money to buy it. But what if we started offering them small chunks of airtime that they can borrow, and then at their own time they will pay it back? So we were able to lend people money as little as $1. And you would pay this over time. And it kept on evolving. It moved from just lending airtime, and then it became lending money, and it became lending service utilities. Like if you ran out of power token, you can borrow it and pay it over time. So that was pretty much it. And I think for me, just being in that institution and being able to see that journey and the level of experience and exposure that it gave me was amazing. And I tend to believe that that company where I joined in, as it was a small startup and began to grow into that scale, is pretty much the springboard that has gotten me to where I am today. Because there are a lot of foundations and experiences that I use today that I strongly believe were as part of that journey. And just learning the ecosystem, dealing with them. And the mobile networks that we dealt with were not just in Africa. We eventually got to deal with mobile networks even in Asia, in the UAE. And before I left the organization, we were actually moving to the Caribbean. So, just giving you this global experience of how people use money, use airtime, and just understanding spending, of how people actually spend and use things. It was just magnificent. And we were dealing with data at that time. And we were not doing data engineering because data engineering did not exist at that time. We were just doing scoring using very basic ways with Excel and a bit of SQL. And that's why I'm saying that this data engineering, I'm sure if I was still at the same institution today, the tools we would be using right now would be out of this world. Because at that time we were doing that, and we were using just simple Excel and SQL to be able to determine how do we lend money and airtime, who do we lend this money to, how do we build their repayment journey, and all those types of things. So yeah, that was my experience. And then from there I moved into a social enterprise, because that was more of a corporate world. So I had this jump from a corporate space into a social enterprise space, which had to do more with offering services where local communities, especially communities that are untapped, can be able to have a platform where they can receive information and also communicate back. So I'll give you an example. Like one of the projects we worked on is on sexuality and female and sexuality education. So we would work with partners who would probably give, like every day they would create maybe a 2-3 minute snippets where they talk about something to do with sexual health, right? Maybe for feeding moms or maternal moms. So they do this, and then we had a platform where we would push out this information by like a broadcast to several people. And then so like, let's say women in a certain village would get this call at around between 10:30 in the morning to 11 o'clock, where it talks to them about, hey, as a woman, these are the experiences you go through. If you feel you're going through this experience, you need to reach out to a doctor. You need to make sure your child goes. We even had areas where it would remind women to take their kids for checkups and polio vaccines, because sometimes in the village, it's not that these vaccines are not there, it's that people don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know that you can actually take your kid and they receive it. So that's one of that institution was working with, that's exactly what they were doing. And we would communicate with, the platform was even designed in such a way that you would communicate to the women in their local language. So they receive a call, but the call is someone speaking in their local language, which even makes it better. Right. And so that way you realize that child mortality went low, because now the women there are well more aware of how they should take care of themselves and how they should take care of their children. And of course, as we did this, what was happening behind the scenes, data was being collected. Again, data comes into being. And these tools, like I was saying, were still not being used. It was Excel and all that. But data was being collected as these types of engagements are happening, and this type of data could be shared with government institutions, NGOs that are involved in public health, and just helping them understand the kind of populations that they have and how they can actually advance and improve their livelihoods. So that was the part that I was in. And then now after that, I moved to this other social enterprise where I'm currently in, where we deal with, this one is a social enterprise that's also a bit fintechy, because we do asset financing to farmers and especially people in rural areas, whereby you allow them to buy a solar panel, and the solar panel comes maybe with a TV, comes with a radio. We are now even moving to a place where now people can even own fridges, you know. And it's really just helping people even in the rural areas be able to start having like more asset ownership, which is also a form of wealth creation. And because I mean, think about it, 10, 20 years ago, someone in the village would never ever think of owning a fridge, or owning a TV, or ever having light. And suddenly these things are now being made available to you, because products are being offered to you and you're allowed to even pay for them for as long as 3 years, where you can pay money as little as $20 a month or $10 a month and be able to own these things. So that's the impact that the social enterprise is creating. But in addition to that, we collect a lot of information. Because before you even learn these types of things, before you offer this asset financing, you need to understand the kind of lifestyle that these people live. You need to understand their spending habits. There's a lot. I think if you ever have a chance, you can go and read into articles like USAID, World Bank, and just the studies that are going behind around asset financing for people who are probably below the income level gap, and how wealth creation and all that is being expanded to allow that these people can also be participants in this. But in addition to that, it's actually allowing financial inclusion. Because remember, these are people who most likely do not have bank accounts. There's no financial information about them that exists. But because of the service that institutions like us are giving to them, we are actually beginning to create a data space where you can now actually be able to see information about people who live in the villages, because we are tracking their payment habits through the loans we're giving them. We have personal behavioral information on them. And so right now, if any institution wants to lend something or do a financial thing with a farmer in a village somewhere, institutions like us can partner with them and help them with that, because we have so much information on them. So that's pretty much been my journey to where I am today right now.
All right, sounds good. So I think that from here we can just move on to like the project. I think I would even guess that it could be the one you first spoke about.
Exactly.
Exactly. But I think that at this point we can speak on it from the standpoint of like I think you've given like very good background to it, but also just like reiterating like what that was, like thought process behind how you came about the solution, stakeholder, how you were able to handle like stakeholder management, as well as the tools you used in solving this problem and the eventual impact.
Yeah, so like I said, sorry, I have actually written my points on a document somewhere. So you'll see me like looking at a document trying to get it out. So like I said, the problem we were dealing with here, or that we were trying to solve, is an issue of data ownership. That was the problem we were solving, because we had no ownership of data. We had no ownership of data from our external parties, because they were the ones hosting our information. And we also did not have ownership of data internally, because remember, people were storing information in what? Their Google Sheets, their notebooks. So literally as a data department and as a business in whole, we had no form of data ownership. And so the problem that we were solving here was more of data ownership of the business and centralizing all business data. So basically, like I said, creating a single source of truth that all business teams would use for their data reference. The business had third-party platforms where we were using to process customer information. So these are more of CRMs, inventory data, like an ERP sort of. And because the business had got all, we had actually so basically for us in our business, you are selling like 3 different products. And all these products are coming from different vendors. So the information is pretty much all over the place, and it's sitting with vendor A, vendor B, vendor C. And we also had, like I said, we had some of our business teams storing information on Google Sheet trackers, notebooks, and all that. And in addition to that, we also do payments, and our payments are done through mobile money.
All right.
So again, this mobile money information is there, but where is it? It's at the telco level. You need to pull that information into your system. So as a result of this data being processed in different platforms, and then in addition to that, I just need to add that one of the things that also bringing a data warehouse was meant to be was to also standardize the format of the data, right? Because when you're pulling data from different platforms, all different platforms have different ways they store data. So you'll have a platform where the date, they store the date, today the date is what, 18, they'll store the date today as 18th June. That's what they will store it as, right?
Right.
Another platform is going to store it as 18-06-2021.
Right.
Another one may store it in the reverse. So again, one of the things, even as we're getting the information into the data was not just having a central point, but was also processing and standardizing the format of data. So if I've gotten information from platform A saying 18th June, the other one saying 2021-0618, and another one saying 18-06, and it's me bringing it, and now I'm agreeing within the engineering teams, within the business, how do we want our data format to look like? So that from the single source of truth, data formats will be processed in a standard and agreed way. And it's no longer going to be, when I pull this information, the information looks like that. So again, also, it wasn't just about having a single source of truth, but also standardizing the way our data looks and it's presented so that it can be easier for an engineer to work with it, or if it was someone doing a data science project, they can easily interact with that, data. And then again, like I mentioned to you, the problem we were solving here was full ownership of data. The other problem also I believe we were trying to solve was to mitigate the risk of us losing data. Should anything happen to a third-party platform.
Right.
And then again, we would have a single source of truth, which would end up being our data warehouse. And then of course, our analytics and business teams would have a dedicated place where they could easily have access to any business data that they needed at any given time. Whether it's the transactional data that happened 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it would all be available in this one place. So again, this problem had to be solved so that the business could gain more ownership and control of their data.
Data. And that was the eventual impact, right? That
yes,
now there is that centralized data point,
exactly,
and structured data.
Exactly. Exactly. So on the project description, like I said, we were setting up a data warehouse. The purpose of this was to have a centralized location and single source of truth for all business data coming from all our data sources, whether it was a Google Sheet or whatever, and create ownership of the data. The background is like I had mentioned earlier. I think I told you we have data was scattered everywhere.
Yeah, I understand. Okay.
Yeah. And then, okay, go ahead.
All right. In terms of the tools that was used in this process, you mentioned Redshift.
Yeah, those Redshift on AWS. So most of the infrastructure was set up on AWS. So we had a Redshift, which was the data warehouse itself.
Right.
And then we had an EC2 instance, which is just a normal server, a normal Linux box, where we would use to process our scripts and all that. And then we had an S3 bucket. So the S3 bucket was basically where all the information we were pulling from all our different partners, our sources, all that information would be dumped there.
Mhm.
And so what we will do is lift that information from the S3 bucket and start processing it through the server, the EC2 instance that I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And then in that institute, we would clean up the data, do all the things, like I said, you're getting data from different places. And so you need to really organize it. So we clean it up. And then once you clean it up, we will take that information back to another different bucket,
Mhm.
which indicates that this data is now the clean data. And then now we have a tool called Airflow.
Right.
Which is what we use to schedule and process the cleaned data. And say, now you Airflow, this is the instruction we're giving you. You're going to pick our data that we have cleaned and now move it and load it into the data warehouse.
Mm.
So
Right.
that's the process and the tool. That's basically the cycle as it was happening.
Mm. Okay.
And,
So as we
Go ahead.
sorry for cutting you there, but I was just going to say that as we begin to round up, what would you say is like your biggest strength and weakness with respect to your technical skills, as well as with respect to your soft skills?
I think my biggest strength for me is my problem solving and critical mindset.
Right.
I am very inquisitive. I really dig down to issues. I'm one of those people, even if you gave me a broken car in the morning, even if I'm not a mechanical engineer, and you tell me in the evening, June, I want you to come and tell me what is the problem with this car, I will sit down and think around how I'm going to get the problem with that car. Of course, I'll not be the one figuring out the car. I'll probably call some mechanics, some mechanical engineers and tell them, I've been given this car, this is the problem. And I will have an answer for you at the end of the day. That's
Right.
how I am. Very, very inquisitive, very critical and all that. I think my weakness sometimes, I would say, is that I'm too black and white. Like I'm very straightforward. Like I'm that person who will tell you, no, that thing you created, it's not good.
Right.
And sometimes, that can come out as offensive, and it has its part. I would say it's a strength and a weakness for me, that I can be very, very blunt. Yes.
So in terms of technically, like what's that part you're not a fan of, and what's that part where you say, I think that's also, I don't know if that's the same answer for both questions, because like from what I have taken down from your strength in terms of your soft skills, I've taken down your problem solving skills as well as critical thinking, and then the weakness being too like straightforward and blunt. But in terms of technical, I don't know if there's any input you have from that end as well.
So can you give me the context around the technical bit?
So the context is, say, the aspect where you know that you excel in very well, maybe a tool or something that you know that is like very second nature to you. And the other part, which is the weakness, is something that you don't see yourself doing in general, like you're not just a fan of that.
So tools that I would see myself excelling in, I am very good with server stuff, the Linux, the fix, just digging in there. Oh, the server's crashed, let's go figure out what's happening inside there.
Right.
Scripting, trying to automate things. Tools, I am very big on maximizing tools. So even when I walk into a new setup and they tell me, June, we want our technical department to look like, the first thing I will find out is what are they doing. And if there are things that I find are being manually done, I will immediately sit down and start thinking about tools. Not because tools are a way of making people not do work, but hey, we need to work smart. If someone is spending 10 hours trying to do something that you can bring in a tool and they will only spend 2 hours, and that way they can spend their energy working on a new project, innovating something new. That's how my mindset is. I think right now for me, as I've evolved and grown through my journey, I would say that I still code, but I do less coding. One, because I feel like I've grown to a place whereby there's experiences that I would want to take down to the teams that I'm seeing are coming up right now. Like, for example, I was giving you the example of the institution I came in. When I came in, there was nothing. So I had to get down and get my hands dirty. Do all the set up the tech structure, build up a server, put in. There was no even the team that the one person that was there was one person who could code. And even that person was not at that level because their background was not really from a computer engineering perspective. They were just doing some basic stuff. And they were storing this code on their machine.
Right.
So it meant that if anything happened to their machine, that the things would crash. So again, having to sit down, do a Git repository, and now start reworking. Even on the way he was writing code, I had to teach him how to start reworking towards how to write proper code. So it's not a matter of, as for getting my hands dirty, I can get my hands dirty for sure. But I feel like that's an area for me also now that I'm slowly wanting to evolve in, and also want to bring in my expertise of my background, growing into software engineering, evolving, and just really growing technical teams. That's where my interest is. Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's fantastic. I'm really happy about our conversation so far, and personally for me, that's the end of my questions. But I wanted to know if you have any questions for me.
Yeah, I have questions for you. So number one, I wanted to find out, where are you guys based?
So the company is based in the US. I am currently personally based in Accra. I live in Accra.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. But we have,
so you're in the same place with me.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, but we have distributed teams. I mean, you can work from anywhere. So we have some people working in Nigeria and different parts of Africa. But in terms of where the business is situated or based, it's based in the US and by a South African founder.
So most of the businesses that the teams are working for are mostly based in the US, not so much in Africa.
I think it's both. It's a mixture of both.
It's a blender. Okay.
Yeah, it's a blend because we've worked with different organizations like Braz. Braz is in Nigeria. There's Copa 360, Nigerian company as well, and then we've done Blue Chip, which is a US company. So it's just a blend. But our focus is really on like high growth companies, and it's just remote first because most of the roles we filled are usually like a remote full-time role, for example. So you probably wouldn't have to leave where you are, but you work full-time for the company.
Okay. Do you get people who are looking like for consultancy gigs and all that?
Yes, we actually get a full spectrum, and that's why we also ask these questions about understanding, what your interests are and all of that. Because
I definitely love. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. For me, I'm actually trying to explore a bit around the consultancy bit because I also feel like the consultancy side allows you to stretch your feet wide.
Yeah.
I think sometimes also when you're in an organization, your mindset is only limited to that space.
I totally understand.
Solving the problem of that place only. But with consultancy, you probably get into a project that will take 6 months, it finishes. You move to another place, meeting different people, and then you keep dealing with different nature of problems. And I feel like I personally, I'm at a place where I want to really stretch myself and have a wider impact. Where I can say that I worked on a project maybe to do with feeding hungry kids somewhere. I worked on a project to do with building creating a building, an architect building. Like there's just so much robustness and variety.
Yeah.
So that's something I've not really fully put myself there, but it's something I've really been thinking around exploring a lot because I'd want to have my impact have a far wide reach. Then the last question on, probably not my last, but yeah, let's just say because time has run out, is how long have you guys been in this space? Like how long has your company existed?
Since last year, since 2020.
Oh, so you guys just started in 2020.
Yes, it's not as old as you might think. So we started off as a data science training company, and it just evolved into what we're doing now, which is like pretty much technical recruitment, because we realized that we got like interest from companies who wanted to fill their roles, and that was sort of like what it was a natural how I call it, demand that we decided to now like move into and say, okay, we want to now focus on just doing this matching for like data analysts, data engineering, people in the data field to companies. So that's how we evolved over time.
It's a really growing field. It's one of the fields right now in tech that is.
Yeah, it's growing, and then you understand that also finding talent could be very hard.
It's hard.
It's like you're finding a needle in a haystack. Yeah, really Like there's a
I
lot
will
of
tell you
graphics.
for sure it's
Yeah.
hard. Like personally, I do in my role, of course, like I told you, I'm a manager and I've done recruitment. I'll tell you for one, I would even take 5 to 6 months to hire to get a hire when someone leaves.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And then, like I told you, imagine for me that time, even when I would hire people in the data engineering and some of the data roles, or even when we have some data science consultants that come, I have to train that person. I would give the person maybe 2 to 3 months for me to get them to understand how things are.
Right.
And then them to develop a mindset where they understand how to deal with that data and process it.
Right.
Through code.
Right. Yeah.
Because like I told you, this is not a field that people learn from school.
True.
Yeah.
And then it's not even about book knowledge. It has to do with a lot of understanding.
It has nothing to do with book knowledge. For
Yes.
one, you have to understand that business data. Because one of
Exactly.
the reasons some people ended up leaving, or we had to let go of some people from the role, it's not that they could not code. They could code perfectly. But them being able to align that experience of their coding with the business side was just not meeting. Someone they do the processing, they code, they run, or the business comes and tells them, you gave us the wrong thing, you gave us the wrong thing. And so it means you need to start having a conversation with someone of, dude, you need to develop your understanding of the data working. Otherwise, if you don't, we need to get you out of this position and get someone else.
Right.
Yeah.
So is that all the questions?
Sorry
about that. No, finish your statement, please.
Yeah, I was saying that those are some of the challenges that I've also had to deal with. And unfortunately, I had to let go of some of the engineers, not because they were not good at coding, but because as much as they were coding, they were constantly giving the wrong thing.
They didn't have a good understanding of the business.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So are those all the questions, or?
I think that's all the questions I have for now. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, June. This was a very wholesome conversation. And as we go along, you will get notifications about if you've been approved on the platform and opportunities that may come around.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.